Thank you. Our next topic is Gilpin Montessori closure, and we have our first group, which has 10 minutes. Please begin and announce yourself before you speak. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Murphy. I'm the CSC president. Catherine Murphy, I am the CSC president of Gilpin, a parent, and a 20-year resident of Curtis Park. Gilpin is Curtis Park and 5 Point's only neighborhood elementary school. It is one of only a handful of integrated schools in the entire city. At every opportunity to discuss grievances about Gilpin's closure with DPS, we have either been misunderstood, been given data that reflects district biases, or replied to with, DPS needs to do a better job next time, or we must uphold the standards of the School Performance Compact. The entire process has been dismissive of legitimate concerns, punitive, and a reinforcement that for all the taglines, mottos, and idealistic mantras that DPS touts in the 6 core values, their true loyalty is to a charter reform movement that rather than sees the whole child and the complexities of a community, demonstrates a continued oppression of the many minority, low income, and homeless that make up our school. Our community has not been part of the conversation about how Gilpin's closure will affect our neighborhood and students. It is time for DPS to back up and do a better job right now and confront the unsolved equity, integrity, and accountability problems associated with their reforms by truly putting students first and collaborating with communities they serve in a democratic and socially just manner. Now, wouldn't that be fun? It would be as fun as seeing children at Gilpin playing and learning together, making friendships with their neighbors who are all colors and from all socioeconomic backgrounds. It would be as fun as seeing the hard work of our new administrators and staff coming to fruition this year with vast improvements at the school. We choose Gilpin, and we want the board to vote to keep us open.
My name is Beth Bianchi. I'm the secretary of the CSC, and I've been a parent at Gilpin for 6 years. My daughter is currently in 6th grade. I'd like to speak to a few different things. One, that Lincoln is not Garden Place. We at Gilpin have requested a dual track for years, but have been denied, telling us that it wouldn't work in our school. Had we had the dual track for as long as we've requested it, we would not be here today. Garden Place will fall prey to low enrollment with the I-70 expansion just approved today. The Sierra Club still has an outstanding lawsuit against the city for its I-70 expansion because of poor air quality. The families in that neighborhood will be losing their homes over the next few years, and enrollment will drop. I understand that Garden Place is a green school, but our children will not be shipped to another school and then shipped to another school a few years down the road. That is not hard to see. Also, the history of Gilpin shows that when we first opened 8 or 9 years ago, our homeless population at Gilpin was once at Ebert, then moved to Gilpin, and now being dissolved into the ether. The history of Gilpin, starting as a Montessori under traditional teachers and a traditional principal, has been an upward battle all along. We finally have gotten to where we want to be. And this was after Mitchell Montessori was moved to Denison because it was a desirable program in an undesirable area of the neighborhood. And that is how our school became a Montessori again. That is not fair. We see how that goes. The SIAC warned the board years ago when DDS was being planned to have a place in a strong turnaround for existing neighborhood schools in the area. What I mean to say is that they warned you. What about Gilpin? What about Greenlee, who are in turnaround status right now? And here we are, closing both Gilpin and Greenlee, despite your internal accountability committee's warnings. UPrep was also open during that time, and in the former Polaris at Crofton building 5 years ago, which has further impacted Gilpin's enrollment. District accountability in creating low enrollment scenarios for neighborhood schools while continuing to open charter schools in our neighborhood needs to be looked at. We hold you, the board, accountable for these things.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Virginia Delgado, miembro del Comité Colaborativo Escolar de la Escuela Gilpin y como padre de familia represento a las familias hispanas. Integridad es ser congruente y transparente con lo que se dice y hace. Hoy afirmamos con evidencia que el representante de las escuelas públicas de Denver, el señor Tom Bosberg, no representa este valor, no tiene integridad al recomendar el cierre de la escuela Gilpin basado en un reporte SQR que presenta grandes anomalías.
My name is Virginia Delgado. I am a CSC member. I'm here representing the Gilpin Hispanic families. Integrity, which is one of the DPS values, means to be congruent, to be transparent with what you say and with what you do. Today, we can say with evidence that Mr. Tom Bosberg, who represents DPS, does not portray this value. You do not have integrity when you recommend the closure of Gilpin Elementary based on an SQR report that contains anomalies and alterations.
Los estudiantes primero, students first. Esto es integridad. Esto es Gilpin, un lugar donde los estudiantes son primero. Esto refleja el trabajo diario de los maestros que Gilpin hacen con los niños, con nuestros hijos, con transparencia e integridad. No así el representante de las escuelas públicas de Denver, señor Buró de Educación. Minoría no es sinónimo de ignorancia. Los padres y familias de Gilpin le pedimos una vez más al Buró de Educación que revierta la decisión de cerrar Gilpin.
A student first, that's integrity. And in Gilpin, we live this value every day, a place where students come first. This is reflected in the job that the Gilpin teachers perform daily with the students, our kids, and they do it with transparency and integrity, which is not what the DPS representative did. Minority is not equal to ignorance. The parents of Gilpin Elementary are asking the Board of Education to reverse your decision to close the school.
Las palabras mueven, pero el ejemplo arrastra. No importa lo que digan, lo que realmente importa son acciones. Los alumnos primero es un valor de DPS que contradice cuando se cierra una escuela. Cuando se toma una decisión de cerrar la escuela sin evidencia clara y transparente. El cierre de una escuela marca el fracaso del representante del distrito. Si Gilpin cierra porque no está al nivel académico como debe estar, como padre de familia de Gilpin, le pido al representante de las escuelas que renuncie a su cargo, ya que usted tiene la responsabilidad de abogar por nuestros alumnos y por una educación.
Words can move us, but example can pull us along. It does not matter what you say, but what really matters is your actions. Student first is a value that you are contradicting when you close this school. Integrity is another DPS value that you are also contradicting when deciding to close the school without clear and transparent evidence. The close of the school shows the failure of the district representative. If Gilpin is closing because it is not up to the academic level that it should be, as a parent, I ask you to please consider to resign your position since you have the responsibility to advocate for our kids and their education.
Lastly, I am asking as a parent to the board, you just said there's lack of transparency. This process is not transparent. Set the precedent starts now. Do not close Gilpin. There's a lack of transparency. Teachers of Gilpin, thank you for all you did. You scored 25 points.
My name is Tanya Muftik-Stryker, and I'm a Denver resident. My dad and mom supported Happy Haynes many times, and my mom sends her warm greetings. But unfortunately, it's not a happy thing for us. I'm supposed to talk about collaboration and fun, but I'm really just going to talk on behalf of the hardworking teachers in DPS and at Gilpin. We have spent tireless hours trying to pull the school up. We are not numbers. We are human beings. We have sacrificed our family time. We have sacrificed our personal time. We put in 60 to 70 hours a week. That's 30 hours of unpaid work time. Who in America does that but a teacher? You have disrespected all of the teachers at Gilpin for one reason and one reason only. We scored a 25. I don't care what anybody says, it was a 25, period. I'm asking you to reverse your decision, not just for the parents, not just for the children, but for the teachers who are probationary. We do not get our jobs guaranteed. You have displaced workers in America in a very difficult time, and it is a shame. I'm supposed to speak about collaboration and fun, but I'm going to say something different. You should think about conscience and fortitude. Conscience to do the right thing, and fortitude to stand up for what's right. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have another group speaking on the Gilpin Montessori closure. And again, make sure you're right next to that microphone and you introduce yourself. Thank you.
Hello again. The last time we spoke, I told you about my daughter Aspen. This is Aspen. She came with me tonight. It took a lot of courage, and I've never seen her so well behaved. So thank you, Aspen. You can go sit down if you want. We've learned a lot in the last 6 weeks, not just parents, but members of the board and DPS staff as well. One thing we learned the most about is SQR. It's an important assessment tool. I even credit Gilpin's turnaround to the incredible hard work of staff and teachers following last year's score of 16. Gilpin went from a 16 to a 24. A significant turnaround and the third highest rating from all schools that went through the SQR process so far this year. It's even more impressive when you realize the score of 16 was made at the end of last year. So really the turnaround occurred in a miraculously short period of time. DPS acknowledges that the reason for a qualitative measure like the SQR is to understand when a school is on the right track, even if that improvement is not yet showing up in its outcome measures. In other words, to identify situations exactly like this, where a turnaround school is working. This measure was put in the compact to protect schools like Gilpin. Instead, it doomed us. A 24 instead of a 25. Or was a mistake made? If a mistake was made, it would have been impossible for anyone to even find out, and still is apparently. Think back to 6 weeks ago. We found out on a Thursday. You met for the work session on that following Monday, and by that next Thursday, following a grueling 4-hour public comment session, you voted to close with barely a question or discussion of the data along the way. 7 days. We asked the following question to Dr. Espiritu in writing 2 days before the vote. Quote, the does not meet score in this year's SQR is not supported by data and is negated in other areas of the report. Is it valid? That was 6 weeks ago. DPS would only give us vague dismissive answers about third parties and rubrics. So we waited for a core request to be filled so we could find out on our own. Imagine the shock when we learned that the score was originally a 2. We dug deeper, and during the follow-up meeting with Ms. Rowe, Ms. O'Brien, and Dr. Espiritu, we asked again. Even after 6 weeks, DPS could not answer the question. Ms. Rowe said it was not the job of the board to review the data, which I understand, I really do. It's a lot of data. But the data was being called into question to close a school. So wouldn't you want to take a deeper look? Wouldn't you want to be able to explain the result? Don't you want to know why it was changed? So much work and effort went into ensuring unwavering commitment to this compact that everyone forgot to do the work to make sure the results were correct. So we did the work for you, and we found a hot mess. After you hear what my colleague has to say about these results, please ask yourself, Ms. Flores, Ms. O'Brien, Ms. Rowe, Mr. Boasberg, Happy Haynes, Mr. Johnston, Dr. Rochelle, ask yourself if you stand behind the results of the SQR, and if you don't stand behind them, you need to make things right.
Thanks, Paul. As you all know, I have provided a lot of information to you all containing evidence that the SQR results for Gilpin are incorrect and sadly are being used to perpetrate a great injustice on the kids of our school. Despite asking for many months for more information, we just received more answers tonight, and it is still insufficient. We all know that several schools experienced adjustments to their scores based on Schoolworks' quality assurance process. You all heard the process that occurred earlier in this meeting. I want to highlight that the bulk of the quality assurance process occurs prior to the narrative statements going to the leaders of our school. There is only one change that occurs after a narrative is sent to school leaders, other than factual corrections, and that is the final calibration step. Our narratives went to our principal on November 18th, and calibration occurred on November 23rd when our question 10 went from a 2 to a 3. Gilpin's score was further adjusted downward on key question 3 a week after the calibration process and right before the reports were finalized. And more importantly, the narrative never changed from the first draft to the final, which means that Schoolworks believed the body of evidence supported the narrative statement. This is important because under Schoolworks' very clear criteria for scoring, despite Ms. Rowe's statement to the contrary tonight, the scoring is done on the narrative statements. Gilpin's narrative statement is consistent and better in at least 2 situations than other schools scoring a 2. West Early was brought up earlier tonight. West Early was adjusted from a 1 to a 2 during the calibration process on key question 3. The first narrative statement for West Early is, assessment strategies do not reveal students thinking about learning goals. They had 29% ineffective on this measure. Gilpin's narrative, on the other hand, was some teachers use a variety of in-class assessment strategies to reveal students thinking about learning goals. Gilpin had only 19% ineffective on this measure, and the category specifically acknowledged the Montessori practice of self-assessment, which they confirmed was occurring. On the second narrative statement in key question 3, which is feedback, Gilpin's statement was identical to the other schools receiving a 2 and had similar ineffective percentages. Schoolworks alignment criteria explicitly states that a 1 is appropriate where the statement references that a practice is not used or rarely used. If something is inconsistently used or sometimes used, it merits a 2. If they had truly been calibrating our scores and comparing the narrative statements and scores to other schools, we would be a 2. DPS first noted that they were comfortable with the Bright Line test because the SQR was objective. A Bright Line test is not appropriate for a subjective test. DPS has admitted that this process has been fraught with problems. The lack of transparency and concern about whether DPS got this right on such an important decision, all while our kids are hanging in the balance, has been stunning. You should not, in good conscience, close a school under this admittedly flawed process. You are putting all of our kids in a worse position, not a better position.
Hi. Thank you. I'm Dr. Cameron Wood-Hunt, and I'd like to address policy implementation, an area of focus in my dissertation and professional work. By now, you know you have a policy implementation problem with the School Performance Compact. The compact promises great schools for all kids, but promise isn't practice. In practice, the implementation is subjective, opaque to stakeholders, and it's missing the element of strong oversight. The implementation is not ready for prime time, and it's undermining your policy goals to have great schools. If you want every child to succeed, the process needs unimpeachable integrity, not results with an asterisk. The SQR results were changed after calibration. That's an asterisk and an implementation problem. Gilpin received a lower rating than schools with a similar or worse narrative. That's an asterisk and an implementation problem. The district provides no independent qualitative instrument validity to this coding used by SchoolWorks. That's an asterisk and an implementation problem. As you heard tonight, the district's plan for Gilpin students is incomplete and embryonic at best. That's an asterisk and an implementation problem. You cannot stand both behind the policy and this outcome with this asterisk. Preserving the policy means reversing your decision and correcting your implementation problems. The impact of school closures to neighborhoods like 5 Points are devastating. The research sends a clear signal. Closure is not success. It creates social distress and negative performance in vulnerable kids that don't find placements in high-performing schools. The effects of implementing this policy cannot be ignored. How kids perform matters, but policy goals only count if implementation succeeds. We need you to be as committed to implementation as you are to the policy. Commit to implementation that doesn't come with an asterisk. You have doubts. Don't undermine your policy with this implementation. Reverse your decision and keep Gilpin open.
Hi. Thank you. I'll be short. My name is Cassie Clark. I'm a concerned parent. Sorry. My name is Cassie Clark, and I'm a concerned parent. The whole failing school frame is incorrect. Our school is not failing. Our kids are not languishing, despite DPS's lack of support for our school. If we're not failing in what counts, is there something fundamentally wrong with Gilpin that cannot be fixed? No. Visit our school this year, and you will see what we see. Gilpin Montessori gives our schools, our kids, stability, character, honor, self-esteem, civic pride, and social awareness. And from that comes academic success. Over the next couple of years, should you prove you do actually have the best interest of our kids in mind, you will see the growth scores that you care about. Gilpin and other neighborhood schools are not failing. This policy is wrong. The school district leadership fails when you mistake closure as reform, and that failure is not unnoticed.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Josie Seal.
Yes, Josie Castillo. I live at 1022 29th Street. I'm 80 years old. I went to the old Gilpin. I worked at Gilpin as a teacher's aide. Gilpin School, I don't know why you're talking about taking one Montessori school to another. What is that about? We need to be in our own neighborhood, and I don't understand what's going on here, but I have a grandchild there now. I had my daughters there. I went there, and I don't understand what's going on here, but living in Curtis Park, we had a lot of trouble down there. In the 70s, houses were boarded up. I was so scared to go outside to have coffee because people were breaking into houses to get all the fireplaces and everything that was valuable in those houses. And then finally in the 70s, later on, the new people came in, and it was so wonderful to hear the sawing and the people with the hammers, and so happy to fix those houses. So I don't know why you want to close Gilpin. All my memories are there, and I don't know what you want to do that for. I don't understand. You want to take one school, knock it down, and take us to another. Please save our school, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Amber Demon.
I'm here to express my concern and heartache over the news of Gilpin. Gilpin is a generation school. Over the last 30 years, my family has attended Gilpin, from aunts to cousins, and now my son. Having my child attend the school is one big blessing for the both of us. In 2014, my life turned upside down. In 2 years, I had 3 strokes. The strokes have affected me in many ways. Also impaired my vision. I do have double vision. Being able to walk 2 blocks to my child's school gives me the freedom that most of you can do with no question. I am unable to drive or take a bus because of my health condition. And the fact that I can walk and volunteer at his school brings warmth to my heart. Our community, as Curtis Park, 5 Points, also I need this school to remain open. Closing its doors is not the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is John Collins. Is John here? Our next speaker is Henry Roman.
There's an old Chinese saying that states, may you live in interesting times. When you look on the internet, it suggests that this saying is actually a curse. If you think about your decision to close Gilpin Elementary, this statement rings true on many levels. There's tremendous stress on the school, the teachers, and the students. Stress within the educational world is not necessarily news, but we have been hearing this with a new sense of urgency and decided to talk to our parents and teachers about the way you made your decision and how it will impact our students. Last week's meeting at Gilpin was extremely troubling. The best hope of the community was that the 3 board members invited to the school would listen to serious concerns about how the process to close the school was utterly compromised. Records gained through the Colorado Open Records Act, CORA, clearly show the lack of transparency. So the following key issues were outlined. The Denver Board of Education used altered data for that final decision. Open records requests revealed that during discussions with DPS, SchoolWorks, the contractor responsible for administering the review changed the score from a 25 to a 24, moving the score from a pass to fail. When the superintendent told Gilpin parents that a passing score would have changed the district's recommendation to close Gilpin, there was no mention of any DPS role in modifying scores. Teachers and administrators at Gilpin have worked incredibly hard this year, but the district appeared to be blaming the teachers for not holding up their end of the bargain. However, in Gilpin's case, parents and students alike are impressed with the achievements, backed in part by Gilpin's improved student attendance, decreased disciplinary incidents, not to mention a culture of self-integration. As a district, our core value of collaboration assumes that parents have agency in decisions. We are ignoring a community who is shouting at the top of their voices, we love our school, and we are committed to making it a great place for our kids. I believe the board has the responsibility and obligation as leaders and decision makers in the district to do what's right. Please reverse your decision to close Gilpin Montessori. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lynn Roberts.
Hi, I'm Lynn Roberts. I speak today as a member of Our Denver, Our Schools, a card-carrying member of the NAACP, and as a Montessori parent from Denison Montessori, to demand a reversal of decision you made last month to shutter Gilpin Montessori. I was at the meeting at Gilpin 2 weeks ago, during which the alert and empowered parents presented information that you admitted you didn't have when you made the decision to close. It is with humility and pride that I join them today and demand action that is responsive to children and their communities. They are an example of what parents must do in Denver Public Schools: in-depth investigative research and grassroots action. Our children deserve it. Montessori classrooms have been called for 100 years the children's house, and my children and I have found a home in Montessori. As a parent of children who attend DPS Montessori schools, because it connects with the attachment theory that informs my professional work, and because my children are happy, productive, and growing in an environment in which they direct their learning and in which their instruction is differentiated without any reliance whatsoever on technology. It is the Montessori teacher who watches, guides, tracks their work, and collaborates with them to grow academically and socially as citizens, not just of the globe, but of the universe. Our Montessori school is our home. The 30 homeless children who presently attend Gilpin Montessori, as well as the rest of the children who found their home there, are threatened because of faulty policy based on fluctuating data, administrative overhead, unprecedented in the state in terms of school districts, and property values. You have offered them a paltry alternative that accentuates mobility and poverty and takes away their home. And it goes against academic research by Ben Kirchner and other scholars at the NEPC, National Education Policy Center, that shows that low income and families of color are 20 times more likely to be negatively impacted by school closures. With all due respect to the Lincoln community, research shows that school choice and competition actually benefit schools like yours in your neighborhood with your demographic. Our Denver School stands in solidarity with Gilpin and other schools that are closed in spite of the needs of children, rather than in service of them. You use them as rationale to further your reform agenda. We all see it and we won't stand for it. So a few further questions. How does closing neighborhood schools and enrollment zone forced busing help achieve Denver Plan 2020 goal of 80% seats with high proficiency rates? Is James Walton and his Montessori business Great Work part of the replacement Montessori program? Does Walton fund the downtown Denver Expeditionary School Middle School that is reportedly slated for the Gilpin property? How is one-way busing, i.e. closing schools in poorer neighborhoods and busing kids out, equitable? Now is your opportunity to attend to the communities you represent and serve, rather than the bureaucracy that would take a home and convert it into more offices for people who work far from the children. We demand you keep
Thank you very
open. And
much.
just to use your example, Dr. Espiritu, we've got the how, we've got the what, we've got the why, and we've got the who. That's what we're here for.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Maggie Miller.
Good evening to the board and to the superintendent. My name is Maggie Miller, and I'm a proud parent of a graduating senior of a Denver public high school and the proud mentor of a junior at a Denver public high school. I'm also a neighbor. I live in the Curtis Park 5 Points neighborhood. And I will be reading a letter from John Hayden, the president, the chair of Curtis Park Neighbors, to the board. The board of Curtis Park Neighbors has unanimously voted to oppose the closing of Gilpin School based on evidence presented to us that the SQR scores were altered in order to justify the closure of the school. This is not the objective process we were led to believe that it would be. The closing of Gilpin will cause great harm to hundreds of low-income students who now depend on the school for learning and in many cases basic nutrition. Contrary to what the DPS has argued, the population of students in 5 Points is not falling. There are over 1,700 new housing units planned for the community over the next 3 years. As of 2014, there were 800 children under 5 years of age in 5 Points and 155 births per year. The community has worked hard to ensure that families have the option of remaining in 5 Points, even as housing prices have risen across the city. There are over 3,000 housing units designated as permanent affordable housing in this neighborhood. That is over 30% of the housing stock in the neighborhood and far more than any other neighborhood in the city. Families are not leaving 5 Points. Gilpin would need around 300 students to meet the needs DPS has to keep the school running. This means they would need to capture less than half of the eligible students in that neighborhood. What is happening is that families with resources are sending their children to other schools because Gilpin has been mismanaged and overburdened by DPS for so long. DPS has opened a number of charter schools and specialty schools nearby which are available to the more affluent families, but present major barriers for entry to low-income families. That is a failure of DPS management and is not a reflection of the school or community. There are plenty of families who want and indeed need to send their children to a local walking distance school, elementary school, and the closing of Gilpin will hurt families who can afford it the least, and families without transportation office or the expertise to choice their children into schools. DPS owes it to these families to provide a quality elementary school in the 5 Points neighborhood that all children can attend. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Eric Charles Troe.
Yes, and my name is Eric Troe. I'm a neighbor of the old San Rafael neighborhood. I'm a fourth-year volunteer at Gilpin. My partner and I haven't any kids of our own, but through the Denver Public Library's Read Aloud program, she and I have read children's books to the ECE kids once a week. And I've been a neighbor of Gilpin now for 15 years, working at the 5 Points Media Center, as I am an on-air host at our local jazz station where we broadcast from 5 Points. We share our... Thank you. Keep those memberships coming in. Thank you all. For 15 years now, I've been working at the 5 Points Media Center. We share our headquarters with Chalkbeat, who have been doing some bang-up reporting on this story as it's unfolding, as well as Colorado Public Television Channel 12 and Free Speech TV. Also, KUVO works in partnership with Rocky Mountain PBS Channel 6. And a big part of my classic jazz guy job description is to preserve the legacy of those who are no longer here to fight for them themselves. And on that subject, I'd like to introduce you to one of my colleagues who couldn't be here today because sadly he passed away about 1.5 years back. His name is Scotty, and Sundays he was the host of Origins, Orgy and Rhythm, the Black experience translated into music. And it was there that I learned real Black expression, like Gil Scott-Heron, like Oscar Brown Jr., like Eric Dolphy, like the wild side of John Coltrane, like Max Roach and Abby Lincoln. In African cultures, there's something called a griot, and Scotty was a 5 Points equivalent, a wise person who keeps alive the stories and lore of the ancestors, so as people in the present know from where we came. And through his music, through his stories, even a suburban-raised white boy like me could gain some insight into another culture. But that's the power of music. That is the power of education. And Mr. Scott was also a nearly 2-decade-long paraprofessional assistant teacher at Gilpin Elementary. So not only is his legacy in me as a music fan, as a 35-year-old Denverite, but as somebody who loves history. I wish that I could have been here in 5 Points when the building was built in '52, and then afterwards we could have caught Count Basie at the Casino Cabaret. We would have seen the Adderley Brothers at the Voters Club and hung out after hours at Lil's. But I wasn't here. I wasn't born yet. And if it weren't for low-income housing, I would have been priced out of the neighborhood a couple years ago. Gilpin was there. And if you close that building, not only will you slam the door in 300 of the greatest kids' faces in this town, but you are closing another door, another chapter in 5 Points' great history as the historic black part of town. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is LaTanya Johnson.
Hi, my name is LaTanya Johnson, and I'm a parent at Gilpin Elementary. I just wanted to say, when I went to school, there wasn't a school like this where kids could thrive and be themselves. I had to really grab a hold of things when I was younger. So that is an advantage for me. But I don't know about all these percentages and all you guys are talking about. All I know is I have 3 kids that go there. And when they come home, they learn, they strive. My son, he's very intelligent. He's very active too. And they have a way of teaching him and holding him still. And he learns. He knows how to read, and he's 4. You know, I don't know if you guys should go in the classrooms maybe, or talk to the students, or see what they've learned. No, I'm serious. See what they've learned, but it would be devastating for you guys to close that school. We walk around the corner, and not only do they learn, my son grows. He's very active, if you haven't noticed. He wouldn't be still at all, but he learns there. And I don't understand all of that, but I do know when them kids come home, they love going to school there. My son, the only way he'll go to bed sometimes if I tell him, well, you got to go to school tomorrow. You got to go to school. You got to go to bed. Otherwise, he's up boinging around, but he loves to go to school. And I don't understand why you would close a school like that. And if there is some things wrong, which when I first heard about it, I couldn't understand it then. I don't understand it now because the way the kids learn. Now, if my kids were coming home and they weren't learning, hell yes, close the school or do something else different because they're not doing the right thing. But I don't see that at all, at all, at all. And if there is a problem, why can't there be ways to fix it instead of having just to shut it down? You know, just shut it down and ship us somewhere else. That's not fair. I don't think that's fair at all. And my son doesn't either. But thank you, that's about it.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Pearl Jingles.
Hello, I'm Pearl Jingles. My daughter currently goes to Gilpin. I have toured Sandoval. I toured Denison. I toured Lincoln. I have not toured Garden Place due to the fact that they just announced this week that they're going to have a program. And thank you for, thank you Garden Place for doing that, although it feels a little forced, doesn't feel welcoming as, it feels like they kind of were pushed to do such. But, well, it is what it is. I also went to Jeffco and toured 3 schools there. One resounding thing on all the schools was, besides 2 of them, it was overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly rich. I'm not super poor, and I am white, but I want my daughter to go to a school where she meets all kinds of people. Gilpin is that school. And she also receives a good education there. She is happy there. And as you had said yourself, you know, when you start things, sometimes they don't always work the way you want them to work. Sometimes they don't work at all. I raised prices at, you know, our restaurant raised prices 3%. We lost 5% business, so we're not going to raise prices again this year. Sometimes when you try something, it doesn't work out the first time. You need to work through it. And I understand you don't want any school to fall behind. But this school, for one, isn't falling behind. It's jumping ahead. And secondly, sometimes the first try on something doesn't always work, and you have to go back and reevaluate it. And maybe that's what you should do with the school pact, and especially with Gilpin, because we have heard not only from Gilpin, but also South High about the ratings and the discrepancies in those. And I know that you hired a company, you paid them a lot of money. That money should give you the trust that they should do the right thing, but maybe they're not. So maybe you should take a closer look at what they're doing, and are you wasting our money, your money? These are our kids. This is your job. It is my job to stand up here and defend my child and her good education. It is also your job to help defend her education.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Matthew Kuhn. He's still at work? Okay, if Matthew does show up, we'll allow him to speak, okay? If he can get here, thank you. Our next speaker is Maria Medina.
Mi nombre es María Medina y mi niño es Jaden Medina, va a 4º grado. Y yo no quisiera que cerraran la escuela porque yo quiero una buena educación para él, que es Montessori. Mis 2 hijos grandes fueron a Montessori y ellos fueron a colegio también, y quiero lo mismo para mi hijo, pero lo que a él le está afectando.
My name is Maria Medina. My son is Jaden Medina. He goes to Montessori, to Gilpin. He's in 4th grade. And I wouldn't want for the school to close. I have 2 daughters that they also went to Montessori and they're in college, and that would be a good thing for him.
Y yo no quiero que él cierren la escuela porque le puede afectar a él. Él, cuando se dio cuenta de que querían cerrar la escuela, él lloró. Y cuando él no quiere que hablen de la escuela que se va a cerrar porque él le afecta mucho, porque él no quiere otra escuela que no sea la suya. Él ama a sus maestros.
I don't want the school to close. When he hears about the school closing, he starts crying. So he doesn't want to hear talking about the school closing. And he loves his school, he loves his teachers.
Y él pregunta, si voy a otra escuela, ¿van a ir mis maestras y mis amigos? ¿Dónde van a quedar? ¿Qué va a pasar aquí? Él tiene miedo, dice, ¿nos vamos a mover de casa o qué vamos a hacer, mami?
And so that impacts him. He says that if he changes schools, what's going to happen to us? Are we going to move? Where my friends are going to go? Where are the teachers going to go?
Yo no pienso que la solución es cerrando la escuela para una mejor educación para los niños. Yo pienso que necesitamos ayuda para seguir adelante, para tener un futuro con nuestros hijos, y vamos a seguir luchando porque siga la escuela abierta.
I don't think the solution is closing the school to get a better education for the kids. I think we need help to continue moving forward, and we're going to keep fighting for the education of our kids.
Gracias por escucharnos.
Thank you for listening to us.
Thank you. Next speaker is Miriam Pena.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Miriam Pena, and I just want to give a shout out to all of the parents because what I'm going to talk about is probably not as eloquent or as informed as the other Gilpin parents, but I can talk about the impact in the community. And also more than ever, I'm so proud to call myself a Gilpin Jaguar alum. So, fast forward some 20-something years later, don't do the math too quick, I became the kinship placement to my 3 nieces. So I became a parent overnight to 3 girls at the time, ages 10, 8, and 6. And I don't know what I would have done without Gilpin. They say it takes a village, and for me, Gilpin is my village, is our village. And I can't help but think what other kids in the system might be in the same place that my nieces found themselves. Before I took custody, sometimes Gilpin was the only place they received their meal for the day. They have teachers like Miss Carroll that help them do research on mental illness because their mom was diagnosed with schizophrenia. Picking up the girls from school when they missed lots of time away from school, and checking in on them a lot of times when they knew they were having bad days. So again, I don't know how I would have done it without them, and I can't imagine the gap that we would be leaving in the community if the school closed. I don't know how I would have done it without the school. So in closing, I think we're all saying the same thing. We want the same things for our kids. We want them to have the best education. And I'm not saying that I'm impressed with our scores or yeah, my nieces could probably read a little bit more every day. I admit that. But I wonder if rather than talking about closing the school, we should be talking about what more resources we can offer the school if it is low performing. So I think that's the only way that we will make sure that girls like mine will break the cycle of poverty, will break the cycle of domestic violence, etc. So thanks for listening, and thanks again for everyone for being here.
Thank you. And our final speaker on Gilpin Montessori is Johnny Reese. Is Johnny here? And did by chance Matthew show up? Okay, thank you. We are moving on to our next topic, which is school failures. And we have Jacqueline Falcone.
My name is Jacqueline Falcone. I have 2 children at Gilpin. Mr. Boasberg told teachers at Gilpin that they had failed and they didn't live up to their part of the bargain in serving Gilpin students. That couldn't be farther from the truth. The truth is, Mr. Boasberg, you as the district leader didn't live up to your part of the bargain of putting students first. Gilpin Montessori passed the school quality review. However, somehow that score was changed from a passing score of 25 to a failing score of 24. Looking at the data compiled by one of Gilpin's hardworking parents, the SQR3 score changed even when the explanation supporting the score didn't. That plays into the integrity of DPS, which has also failed. The inference can be made that DPS wanted our schools so bad because they need more office space for the ever-expanding administration. Even after the district spent $70 million on this building, they still want more space and thought nothing of evicting our children, our students from their place of learning, and found a way to serve their eviction notice by failing the school. Your failure also lies in not supporting the students at Gilpin with all the sports they have needed since opening up it as a Montessori school 6 years ago. Your failure lies in not providing equity and ensuring that Gilpin Montessori, like other DPS Montessori schools, be allowed specific enrollment guidelines for students who choice into the school with no Montessori training, or not providing a dual program at Gilpin with both traditional and Montessori classrooms. Your failure lies in not ensuring that only licensed Montessori trained and experienced teachers were hired at Gilpin, when research shows that they have a better success rate with low-income and low-achieving students. Your failure lies in not providing a full-time support staff to meet the needs of every child, and particularly those below grade level skills and those with discipline issues, so that we could have a safe and productive learning environment. But even with the failures of the district year after year, despite the challenges Gilpin has faced year after year, despite the pressure Gilpin has felt under the constant threat of school closure year after year, the students and teachers have persevered. Teachers have committed themselves to teach our students over and above normal teaching expectation, and as a result, our school is on the path to tremendous achievement. They have risen above and beyond the failures of the district and have pushed our school to grow in ways not seen in other schools under the SQR. But then, once again, the district failed our students, teachers, and school by failing to honor the true SQR score of 25 and by closing the school. It's time to own up to your failures. Honor the compact and reinstate the existence of Gilpin Montessori School. You tried to hold our teachers accountable for our school's failure and not living up to their end of the bargain, which consequently put their future jobs on the line. Perhaps the people who really failed the school didn't live up to their end of the bargain, nor exhibit integrity and honest SQR reporting, be the ones to own up to their failures and have their own jobs on the line. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Our next speakers are on school closures, and our first speaker is Dr. Joyce Brooks.
Good evening, school board and Superintendent Boasberg and staff. My name is Sandra Young. I'm the NAACP president. And in proper protocol, I'm here with Dr. Joyce Brooks to talk about school closure.
Good evening. It's been a long evening, but to President Rowe and the board and Superintendent Boasberg, we, the Denver NAACP chapter, is here to support the parents of Gilpin School. And we're here for 3 reasons. First, we want to say to you, rescind that vote. Keep that school open. The 3 reasons behind that is really this whole notion of closing schools as a form of school reform is quite ill-conceived. Rachel Cohen, and you have that citation from DCTA in a letter, she wrote an article this past spring in Prospect, and she said, school closures, that is a blunt instrument and can have painful consequences. One of the painful ones that we see is that you've not really included these parents in the process leading to this final decision. The second thing, NAACP is truly investigating now the school closures that are happening here in Denver. There are some close to 15 schools have been closed. Is this a retrenchment? Are we going backwards? these are in low-income, non-white areas. Gilpin is a school where these folks are trying to integrate. This is what we fought for in the 50s and 60s as NAACP. In the South, when schools were closed, well, when they did forced desegregation, the black schools were closed. The teachers and principals of those schools lost their jobs too. We're seeing that here in DPS. The last thing, while I'm critical of what you've done, I also want to offer some help from the NAACP to you. One of the reforms that really has worked and is working in urban districts is community organizing. These folks are showing that they want their school, and they have begun improving and growing and developing a better school so their children can be successful. We want to join them in that, and we want you to help us with that by organizing around. Let's get in there together and work to help them. We want to be a part of that too, and keep their school open and don't close it.
Good evening, Board of Education Superintendent. I, too, am a member of the NAACP, and I am glad to see that my organization is going to join in this fight. Well, we always have been in this fight. Anyway, I'm talking about transportation versus neighborhood schools. In 1991, when my son was 4, I won the lottery, and he was accepted at Mitchell Montessori. I was excited because I knew that Wallace would thrive in a Montessori setting. But then, his granny, nanny, and I thought about our baby being on a school bus from Montbello to the Whittier neighborhood. We both decided no. We sent him to Oakland Elementary, his neighborhood school, where Granny walked him to and from school every day. She also ended up walking a number of other children to and from school along with Wallace, some of who are still his friends. Dr. Espiritu, providing transportation and choice is not a substitute for being able to attend a neighborhood school. In Southeast Denver, where we have our best schools, students have a good traditional school choice in every neighborhood. I think that I can accurately say that that is what we all want. When schools are faltering, we want you to fix the existing school, not blow it up, make it an innovation school, or close it. Communities have always asked you to fix schools, not to close them. As an experienced educator, I have come to the conclusion that you simply do not have the educational personnel that know how to improve schools. Not on your central staff, nor in your innovation and charter schools. That is unfortunate, especially in neighborhoods like mine, where there are no quality elementary or middle school choices. We have one decent high school choice that, as a charter, is allowed to choose its kids and is limited in the number of students it can serve. Because it seems to choose only our most highly skilled students, I assume that it is allowed to skew the lottery by putting extra draws in the bucket for students with high test scores. The DPS choice process has never been transparent, so who knows? Parents at Greenlee, Ames, and Gilpin want to keep their schools open, as did parents at Manual, Montbello, North, Smiley, and Mitchell Montessori. Yes, there are and were achievement issues, but if my memory serves, the stakeholders always asked for a fix, most of which centered around needing more qualified teachers, no classroom served by different substitutes all year, smaller classes, good and fair discipline policies, and great principals. What we have been given is charters and innovation schools that do not meet neighborhood expectations, that in many cases are no better than the schools they replaced. Just saying.
Thank you. Thank you. That concludes the public comment session. As I suggested before we went to public comment, we would return for more board discussion around Gilpin. Prior to doing that, as we moved into public comment session, I neglected to go through the consent agenda, so we need to do that. It'll not take much time at all. With that said, Madam Secretary.
.501, approval of minutes from the December 15, 2016 regular board meeting. 502, approval of minutes from the January 17th, 2017 executive session. 503, approval of resolution for designation of posting place for Board of Education agendas. 504, approval of gift report. 601, contract approval for PP 269 Centennial Elementary School renovations. 602, contract approval for 700760 Park Street ECE 5 school design. 603, approval of resolution to increase the cumulative borrowed funding amount from the State Treasurer's Fund, Interest Fund Program. 604, approval of resolutions amending the adopted budget for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2016 and ending June 30th, 2017. 801, approval of the personnel transaction report.
Thank you. There were no items held. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move adoption, Madam President.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Dr. Espiritu?
Aye.
Ms. Flores?
Aye.
Ms. Haynes?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Ms. O'Brien?
Aye.
Ms. Rowe?
Aye. Thank you. And so now, returning to board member comments with regard to Gilpin, I will open up the microphone to my colleagues. Do folks have further comment or on this topic? Ms. Haynes, thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you for all of the parents and community members who've come tonight to share your views and your passion about Gilpin Montessori. I think the process, as you have aptly described, was flawed, particularly in respect to the sharing of that process with all of you and what it meant and what the steps were. A number of people have talked about and it's focused, the conversation tonight has been focused on the SQR, although I will add that the overall part of the consideration is the more objectively obtained scores, growth numbers for the school, which have been persistently low for a number of years. So it's a school that we've had great concerns about. There have been some discussion tonight about resources and additional support for the schools in the form of tiered support. That has occurred, and to my satisfaction, it's one of the questions we asked, where were some of the additional resources and what kind of additional supports have occurred to help schools that have been struggling. Are we in a position as a district to provide every resource that we would like to in every school? I wish we could. But I think we have made certain that with our schools that are struggling and that we have focused on over the last number of years, that we provide additional resources, and that has occurred over the past 3 years. Let me say a few words about the SQR, which is the part of the evaluation process that is designed to help provide a little balance for the pure numbers. Because we've heard very clearly, and we all believe, that everything about a school isn't reflected solely in the numbers. That there are other ways, other practices, what you see in a school. It's the reason why the SQR was developed. We've had a long-term partnership with SchoolWorks in the past, and I will say this was, in this instance, one of our failings this year. And in the past, we have gone through much greater review of those SQR processes in depth. And so I think that accounts for some of the steps in the process that we missed this year, and I own some of that as a member of the board. I could have and should have asked more questions about the SQR and the process and how we got to the final results. I will attribute that to one thing that I continue to believe today, and that is a great level of confidence in the work that SchoolWorks has provided for us over the years. So I've been through the step-by-step process of the SQR that they conduct on many occasions. I've seen what they do, the steps that they take, the rigor involved in the process, and it was based on that level of confidence that I think I will speak just for myself, in making the decision of accepting the results without walking through each of the steps. Can they make mistakes? Of course. They are not perfect. I will say this, I am convinced that they are the best, if not among the best in this country in providing these kinds of assessments, independent assessments from the district, so that we would have a body of evidence, not just simply a set of scores or one item that helps to balance that. And so I will, I say that to you tonight. I own that failure. However, I have had a chance subsequent to the initial decision we made to go back through those documents, to go through all of that data, and I haven't seen anything in it that would dramatically change my conclusion at the end of the day, although I think we are compelled to take a much harder look at the SQR process and our process in terms of reviewing the work that's done and the information that we get as board members, which must include all of it from beginning to end, so that we have that information in a timely fashion, and that we're not looking at it after the fact and trying to second guess whether the decision we made previously the right decision. There were considerations about the enrollment and whether a school can sustain and support students, and that I think so all of those are factors in the decision that we make and in the decision that I made. After listening tonight, I'm not prepared this day to make a different decision, but I do have some remaining questions, and I will be pursuing those over the next couple of days. And I don't know whether that would compel me to make a different decision or to beseech my colleagues to reconsider. But there are a number of questions that I still have that I'm going to reflect on over the next couple of days. But as I said before, I haven't, based on reviewing all the data again over the SQR, seen anything that would compel me to change the decision. And it's a tough decision. I mean, it's on these are not easy decisions. And I appreciate the disappointment and the passion and your belief that it isn't students first. I can only say that I'm convinced that every member of this body and the superintendent act in every day with the thought of students first. We may not agree on that decision serving that value or not, but I do believe that is what drives each of us in the decisions that we make, and so I just wanted to share those particular views with all of you tonight, and again, thank you for sharing and your passion. It is. We are committed, if this decision stands, which I believe it will, to doing the steps that we discussed earlier in supporting the families on what the next steps are for them in the most rigorous and supportive way that we can, as I think as we discussed at the very beginning of the meeting when we were talking about the choice office and the support that they had provided. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Ms. Haynes. Ms. Flores? Ms. Flores?
So I think that, like my colleague, Ms. Haynes, I feel a responsibility in sharing my thought process in terms of I don't see myself bringing forward a motion to rescind this initial vote. But I also feel it's important, especially to acknowledging and seeing faces of people that I've known in my life for a long time who are shaking their heads at me. So I listened to you, and now it's my turn.
Folks, please let Ms. Flores speak. Thank you.
So I represent District 5. In District 5, there are over 50 schools. Of those 50 schools, I had 32% that were not red, orange, and yellow. I had, while I was campaigning for this seat, several different community circles and groups that asked me, especially because I was representing such a large percentage of schools where it was high poverty schools with a heavy concentration, not just to free and reduced lunch students, but also to English language learners and special ed students. And what I was being pushed on was the fact that so many of these schools were low performing, not just year after year, but decade after decade. And the question was, what were you going to do? When I look at the district as a whole, we have we had a lot of cause for celebration this morning, or earlier in the meeting, I should say, in terms of the blue schools that we had, the increased graduation rates, and the and the decrease in dropouts. On the other end of that spectrum is the fact that we have 6,000 students in elementary schools across the district, where less than 20% of those kids are on or above grade level. Less than 20%. And that the growth at those schools is such that those students are falling further and further behind each year. And that by the time those elementary school kids, if they're not on grade level, by the time they get into middle school, that gap widens and they fall further behind as they advance through middle and high. So part of what I have signed up for in this role is to ensure that we are doing all that we can to support our teachers and our principals, and part of that includes additional professional development, additional supports in the schools, and additional tiered support funding. With Gilpin in particular, over the last 3 years, above the regular funding that they get, Gilpin over the last 3 years has gotten $1.4 million. There are 150 students in grades K through 5th at Gilpin Elementary. Again, over the last 4 years, an additional 1.4 that has gone into supporting that school. And yet, I'm looking at the growth in the status for this last year. Status is how many kids are on or above grade level. It was 16.1% this last year, and the growth, 21%. That, for me, says that we need to take action and we need to do something. That is the information that I have. And again, the commitment that I have made to the community is, one, to ensure that those tiered supports are there. And then, as you have said, when we as a district have failed, to take action. The kind of turnaround effort that you were talking about too, has across the nation, not actually, I have different information that I've been looking at in terms of what that success rate looks like. You have schools that are, after 7 years, still struggling to really turn around and show that academic performance and growth. Our kids, as you know, you had 7 years, that's a whole nother generation of kids that are coming through. We need to serve our kids that we have now as best as we can.
Thank you, Ms. Flores. Dr. Espiritu.
Thank you, Madam President. I am incredibly touched and moved by all of your presence here today. The amount of work and sleepless nights that I'm sure you've had during this process. And I know it's been incredibly fast and furious, and it has not happened in the way that I think any of my colleagues would have liked. This is such a painful process as a board member, such a difficult decision. And as Lisa, my colleague, mentioned, they're just, part of our role is to make these difficult decisions and know that not everyone is always going to agree with us. I too feel like I have looked at the data, as my colleagues have, with an evaluator's hat on as well, and understanding how things are done. So I understand. And thank you for your presence here today and sharing.
Yeah, hang on one moment. So public comment is over, and I apologize. And I would like to finish this board meeting, and then I'd be happy to hear what you have to say, okay? Do any of my other colleagues have any further comments with regard to this? All right. And I believe we have one last item, Mr. Superintendent.
Board members, you received my recommendations for teacher dismissals pursuant to the Colorado Teacher Employment Compensation Dismissal Act, CRS 22-63302. The basis of these recommendations are described in the documents contained in the folders you received from our General Counsel, Jerome Bureau.
Thank you, and unless there's any new business from my colleagues, seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.